Your boy Zach said to make a video about this, so I responded, challenge accepted. So I'm going to read this cold. Christopher Priest welcomes Vampirella to the real world by Chris Arrant, editor. What does Christopher Priest see when he looks at Vampirella? Loneliness. And his new Vampirella ongoing launching July, a veteran writer will give Vampy the human connection she craves before ripping it all away. Illustrated by Gundam's Dynamite's new Vampirella relaunch begins with the alien vampire's last survivor plane crash, took away and blah, 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 blah. Someone like Vampirella, but do you really? As Priest tells NEWSARAMA in an email interview, Vampirella's supernatural abilities are a metaphor for a universal human condition, for being either rejected or idealized, or in the case of our series, both, because you are different. Anyone who's ever moved to a new town or new school, taken new jobs, will be able to identify with Vampy's challenge. Priest, an ordained Baptist minister, as a reminder to readers, prefers to be addressed as priest. Okay, why do you tell us this? Shared his thoughts with NEWSARAMA, how the prospect of writing Vampirella was first received, how it fits religious life, and how he's using to examine humanity. That looks like some pretty good art. Why does this garbage tier website have a pop-up ad that I can't get rid of? That's garbage. NEWSARAMA, Priest, what makes Vampirella interesting to you? The Fangs, definitely the Fangs. When DC Comics approached me about writing Deathstroke, I really never thought much about the character. Wasn't a book I normally read because I probably wasn't the target audience. It presented an interesting challenge. What new things could I find to say about this character, and what unexplored areas of the character were there to develop? Dynamite publisher Nick Brucey said, Vampirella had nearly the same identical reaction. I was, of course, familiar with the character, wasn't a Vampirella fan, wasn't the audience for the book. You have to ask Nick. My immediate reaction was exactly the same. What new thing could I bring to the property? Where is the untapped potential? That, for me, is the interesting part. Craft a Vampirella narrative, broadens the audience for the property, while hopefully not putting off the hardcore Vamp fans. So what was the answer? What's the story? I read the Bruce Springsteen Rolling Stone interview a couple decades back. Yeah, decades around Born in the USA. That was in like the mid-80s, I think. Springsteen's something remarkable about stuck with me all the time about how each of us needs community. He said something like, without community, by which I presume he meant human attachment and interaction, we'd likely to go crazy and kill ourselves. Over many interpretations, Vampirella has developed many versions of a supporting cast. She is fundamentally alone, one of a few of her race living on Earth. Considering the boss's statement, I wasn't eager to create yet another supporting cast and then echo adventures she's had before. For better or worse, I wanted my at-bat with the character to be unique and in some ways challenging. So the thought occurred to give Vampirella that community, that human connection, and then have it all ripped away. Our story arc revolves around a plane crash which effectively terminates many connections she had built while forging new ones. You're setting this in the real world, a real fish out of water scenario, but one you're playing at for deeper cultural issues. What's a woman like Vampirella likely to face here on Earth? With all due respect for the legion of much better writers who handled the character, as I mentioned, I probably was not the audience for the book. She was created with a satirical flair, and Vamp herself was in on the joke, not quite breaking the fourth wall, but offering up a knowing come-hither smile. She existed in a reality that routinely, and for me, far too benignly, accepts the supernatural as fact. Here in the real world, vampires are merely a thing of myth, and the reality of hyperfactual supernatural events are subject to the interpretations of the particular tribe one belongs to. It bothers me that in 2019, DC and Marvel universes are still mostly portrayed in an idealized hyper-reality where the average man on the street simply accepts superheroes as fact, and in fact refers to them literally as heroes or villains, which is absurd. There's no news anchor in the world who would start a broadcast piece with arch-villain Saddam Hussein, even though that description would be apt. The world our Vampirella series takes place in doesn't believe in vampires, or witches, or warlocks. This world seeks rational scientific explanation for paranormal phenomenon, which agrees with enormous skepticism, which isn't to suggest no one will believe Vampirella exists, but that acceptance is not as a matter of fact as it seems to be in most of the genre. In terms of what she's facing, her number one enemy is loneliness. I'm hopefully writing a woman first, a story about a woman who loves and wants to be loved, but whose circumstances are complicated by the fact she has fangs and drinks blood. The supernatural attributes are a metaphor for a universal human condition, for being either rejected or idealized, or in the case of our series, both, because you are different. Anyone who's ever moved to a new town or new school, taken new jobs, should be able to identify with Vamp's challenges. Anyone who wears their hair in a different way, listens to a different kind of music, embraces a different religion, and who steps outside, who's shoved aside as so-called mainstream, can identify with our take on Vampirella. I hope it is precisely this universality of theme that helps broaden her audience, that Vampy tent is large enough for everyone. NEWSARAMA, someone walking around in that Trina Robbins designed costume is bound to get some head turns. I know you as much as I think I do, you're going to tackle that head on, right? How are you getting into the subject of the costume? Well, yes, we will have a go at it. The basic argument is simple. Where do you draw the line between a woman's liberation and a woman's exploitation? And who gets to draw it? Who gets to define femininity? And why should an extraterrestrial have to submit to that definition? It's like the world woke up in the last few years and realized we actually have two genders and both of them matter. So now we have heightened scrutiny of themes and behaviors, and that poor bastard Joe Biden gets caught up in the switches. I'll confess, I'm terrified of women because I'm a Joe Biden. I was taught to pay a lady a compliment and open doors, and I want to be friendly and accessible. I'm absolutely terrified of having my good intentions taken in a bizarrely paranoid light. It is comical to me that I am far too often seen as creepy by women, especially black women, because they have been conditioned by their personal experience and their media consumption to misinterpret a simple hello. These days, I cannot pay a woman a compliment without a legal preamble and assurances that no, I'm not hitting on you. Even then, I get the skunk eye of suspicion, which is a little insulting because his guilty until proven innocent defensive posture presumes I'm other people, or that the bar is set so low for me that I'll jump into bed with just anybody I happen to meet. It's like we've just gone too far now to the point where women are not just being protected, but being alienated to some extent because I have no earthly clue how to deal with them, and I'm frankly scared to shake their hand. So is Vampirella wardrobe choice sexist? I don't know. Vampirella obviously doesn't think so. As I see her, she comes from a culture much like Star Trek's Betased, where people wear little, nothing, or nothing at all. If anything, Vampy wonders why we humans choose to smother ourselves in so much fabric and why we're all so bound by self-loathing. I think that's only the American, puritanical SJW Americans. There are hundreds of women who enjoy cosplaying as Vampirella and maybe hundreds of thousands offended by the character. How do we reconcile all that for the 21st century? One thing I won't do is cover her up. I accepted the gig, right? Vampirella. If you change the outfit, she's no longer Vampirella. Frankly, her costume is the only thing about her. Well, okay, that and her pansexuality that makes her at all shocking or controversial. My goal, and the readers will have to let us know if we're passing or failing, is to make this a book as much about femininity as about blood-sucking. Storyline is driven by women, mostly populated by women of all shapes and sizes, ethnicities. Most of them dress as sexy as they dare. The singer, Lizzo, is a terrific example of this. Is her blatant sexuality liberating, or is she being exploited? How about Beyonce? Do we put Vampy in a raincoat but cheer Bey on? See what I mean? I'm screwed either way. So Priest, Vampirilla's here on Earth. Vampirilla's here on Earth. What would you do if you found yourself, I don't know, sharing a cab with Vampy? I'd ask the driver to pull over and let me out. I'm a Christian, so I have these issues with all that fornicating in your mind stuff. I don't live a perfect life, but I try to avoid cluttering up my conscience. Among the things the printed page cannot convey is the amazing, intoxicating glow and, yes, smell of a woman. All women are beautiful from 8 to 80, regardless of weight, height, or nationality. I wouldn't share a cab with a woman as underdressed as Vampy, which sounds hypocritical because I'm riding her. I ride Deathstroke, too, and I wouldn't share a cab with him either. On the flip side of this, Vampirilla is stranded on Earth. What's going through her mind? All this, I guess that's her costume. She wears a bikini, essentially. Looks good to me. How stupid and primitive we are. It's not arrogance. I believe any visitor from another world would surf the net for a few hours, come away shaking their heads. I watched an episode of Little Miss Atlanta yesterday. Jesus, we're just idiots. The moms fighting and bickering and cursing in front of these little girls, berating that little girls. It's sickening child abuse. That's entertainment. I have Christian friends who criticize me for writing Vampy, but they watch that crap. This comes over a decade after your previous stint with Vampirella. Harris Publishing's Vampirella Revelations with artist Eric Battle. That run had some issues, but you're back here again. What makes it something you want to return to? Scratch his head. I'm looking at the X-Men, the Miss Marvel ad. What cancer? Really, I did a run. I remember doing a silent issue and vaguely remember doing something with Eric, a good bud, but that was way back. I really hadn't considered this return. I just pivoted and stared into Barushi's hypnotic vampire eyes and ran dozens of scenarios through my feeble brain, coming to one conclusion. This would be an interesting experiment, a writer's challenge, or writers love challenges. Big picture, what are your goals with this ongoing? to not have the women of America torch my house. This run will be as different a take on Vampy as any that would come before, which is not to say better. Better is subjective. I'm sure a great many Vampy fans will hate what we're up to, and maybe they'll come along, maybe I'll get fired. If I wasn't nervous about it, it wouldn't be worth doing. Editor's note: the above interview was conducted via email earlier this week, and we received all of Mr. Priest's response along with all of our original questions. NEWSARAMA asked Priest if he would respond to follow-up questions Friday by email. He agreed, and those questions answers follow. Priest, our original questions, you asked about the comic book, and our roles talk about that and not audit your personal life. But your responses appear to be hyper-aware of a social climate you seem to lament in terms of relationships between genders and conduct towards one another. Is that a question or a statement? I lament the social climate in general on all levels. I lament our lack of civility and lack of empathy, lack of patience, understanding. I hate the way we assassinate one another with our thumbs. Wow, that is a great phrase. All this hostility in social and other media, it's not just gender issues. Yet empathizing with Joe Biden without citing the actual specific behavior he's under scrutiny for, stating things like the amazing, toxic, glowing, I smell woman by offering you're often seen as creepy by women, seems like intentionally inviting the sort of reaction and assumptions you state you're afraid of, inviting the same scrutiny Biden is under. Was this your intent, and are you prepared to push for pushback to your words and questions to be asked? Well, of course he is. That's why he said it. Wow, that's a lot to unpack there. Let's start by saying I seriously doubt anyone reading this is not aware of the Biden issue to which I am referring. I come neither to defend Biden nor to bury him, so I think you're probably taking my poor Joe reference a bit too seriously. Damn it, dog. Sorry, that was a doggus interruptus. She decided to walk in front of the camera. So I think you're probably taking my poor Joe reference a bit too seriously. I wasn't trying to litigate Biden, only make a point about how hypersensitive and overly politicized our nation is, how this will impact Vampirella in her series. Assembling disparate quotes to point me as some kind of deviant makes that point for me. I stand by my statements. The amazing, toxic, and glowing I smell woman is something difficult and not possible to convey in literature, which was my point. But your question was about me sitting in a taxi with a near-naked woman. I answered that honestly. My point was relevant to understanding the challenges and conflicts Vampirella will face in this series. This is the environment Vampirella finds herself in, people misinterpreting her actions, words, and motives. That's why I mentioned it. The place of work we're dealing with Vampirella in a context. Were a person like Vampy walking around in our world or riding a taxi with me, she would be misinterpreted, and every word she says would be drilled into looking for the worst possible interpretation of it. I can't help but wonder why anyone anywhere speaks publicly, because no words spoken by anyone can withstand this ridiculous scrutiny. Amen. In another response, you state, it's like the world woke up in the last few years and realized we actually have two genders and both of them matter. While not assuming your intent one way or another, it seems to overlook genders outside the... Oh my God. Seems to overlook genders outside the male-female paradigm. Can you speak to that? Priest, gender, noun, either of the two sexes, male and female, especially when considered with reference to social cultural differences rather than biological one. The term is also used more broadly to denote a range of identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female, a condition that affects people of both genders. Yeah, if I remember, gender is from the biological term, the outward expression of the two biological sexes. And the two biological sexes are X, Y, and XX. Sometimes you might have some variants, but you always have the X and XY core. So yes, there are two sexes, and yeah, there are two genders. I wrote an ecumenical commentary in support of gender in the LGBT whatever issues. Christ, I invite everyone to read it. It was a simple interview. I was promoting a comic book, and I was a really busy writer. I was typing really fast, speaking honestly while engaging with you. What I won't do, not even for my own safety, is censor myself for trying to anticipate every horrible way someone might choose to interpret something I've written or said. If anything, it just makes my point for me about how free speech is being compromised. It's a tough environment to publish comic books in because every publisher is terrified by the spectrum of extreme possible reactions from an increasing intolerant environment where everyone's playing gotcha and looking for the worst possible and most extremely negative interpretations of everything. The whole point of free speech is my duty to defend others' right to have it, not to shout them down or demonize them. Fair enough. I don't see what was so controversial about that. Oh, comments. Wow. Does this interviewer grasp that he's harassing one of the most talented vets in comics? Have some freaking respect in your elders, if not respect for the talent. Glad to see Priest stand up for himself. You can almost hear the interviewer's gears grinding as Priest talked about religion, gender relations between men and women, and tolerance. I think the interviewer got harsh on Mr. Priest. Nice to see someone shut up one of these millennials, the absolute worst generation. You'd be right, Mr. Parker. I don't read vampy books, but after this disgraceful treatment of a comic legend, and after Priest's admirable response, I will buy this book. Yeah, I don't see what the big Christopher Priest. Who's the writer? Chris Arrant. Let's see what he looks like. That would be Chris Arrant. Are you judging me, Chris? What's with the hat, dude? Come on. Oh my God. Just take a photograph. You don't need to. People on Twitter. Editor NEWSARAMA for Future Pick. ALA Comic Book Roundtable. Eisner Judge. Oh, you're an Eisner Judge. That would explain why Kim and Kim and the other mags, Eternity Girl, get nominated. Oh my God. Okay. All right. I'll keep it. Food. Gail Simone. Food. Yeah, I don't want to join Twitter. I don't have a Twitter account. We're inviting attending comic creator staff for our welcome event, a milkshake social honoring Flo Steinberg. Festivities start at the Sugar Factory. That does look pretty good. But milkshake, Ron Mars, Chelsea Kane is a. Okay, so it's this hard left collection of idiots. Yeah, Chelsea Kane. Do me a favor this weekend. Find a comic book store. Go inside, buy a comic. It's easy. They only cost a few bucks. Support the stores and the makers. Support the stories. We are really so incredibly lucky that all these people spend all this time making these things for stop writing crap. Can you do that, Miss Tampon Woman? You have a talking tampon in your book. You're out of your effing mind. Far left. Want to join the editorial team at Nerdist? We're hiring a managing editor. Look for someone to organize, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you're not... could someone join if they were a moderate or right of center? No. Not needed. Okay, you're a cat person. That's a cute cat, but that says a lot. Anyway, Timothy Zahn. I think he wrote the trilogy about Darth Vader and the Hand, his personal assistant, who he pushes out an airlock at the end. It was a good trilogy. It was written a few years ago. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Leave a like and a comment.